So prior to the MLB lockout, the starting pitching market was basically decimated. Free agent starting pitchers are going to be very difficult to come by once we get out of this lockout. Now, does that mean the Minnesota Twins rotation is doomed in 2022? I think it's a narrow path to build this thing up, but I think they can do it. And I have one trade that can address most of the rotation. We're going to talk about that, but first I want to go into real quick my original offseason blueprint, which had another trade that I want to keep sort of in my blueprint 2.0, which will be sort of building as we go here. It seems like we have plenty of time left before things get back active after they get everything resolved, so we'll continue to talk about this. But I'm still going to say that the Twins should trade for Paul DeJong. Speaking about another trade candidate, he is a shortstop. This team absolutely needs a shortstop, and I look to the free agent market, and I don't love what I see there, too, what's left. The Twins aren't going to pay for Carlos Correa. It wouldn't shock me if they went after Trevor Story, but I think he would eat up so much more of their payroll space of what they're willing to spend left, that they would have so little left to invest in the rest of the rotation. It would basically make it impossible for them to add much pitching. So really, it's very difficult to find a shortstop solution on the free agent market, so I like this Paul DeJong trade that I had. It would take someone, I think I had Matt Wallner was among the guys listed, that kind of type of prospect. I think the Twins have so much corner outfield depth in the organization right now, they could do that. And for the Cardinals, they have Edmundo Sosa as a guy who emerged at the end of last year as a guy who was, pre-arbitration. He was a rookie, so he's making the minimum as a shortstop. Looks really great in the field and has some potential at the plate. So, and DeJong is one of the better defensive shortstops in baseball, and he has a 30-homer season under his belt. He's got a lot of power. Some other holes in his game offensively other than that, but I think he's better than how he's played the last couple of years. So, still like him to address that problem, but let's talk about the pitching. So I built this trade up over at Baseball Trade Values. That's a place, it's the best tool we have for trade valuations. I think there are some issues with it. It's not perfect. You have to be honest with yourself while you're looking at this thing, and I think you have to sort of show your work. So I'm going to go into explaining why I think this trade makes sense, much like, I talked about the Cardinals have a shortstop replacement, and, Paul DeJong is owed a good amount of money. Not a lot of money, but again, Sosa's going to be making the minimum. They're not going to want to pay DeJong as much as he's owed. I'll put that up on the screen here, his future contract. To be a bench guy, and the Twins really don't have an immediate shortstop solution. I'm not confident they have a long-term shortstop solution, so that's why I think he makes sense for them. So that's sort of the thing you have to do is kind of build a logic for both teams. And both teams, sometimes there's three teams, and that's what I built up here, a three-team trade with the Minnesota Twins, the Houston Astros, and the San Diego Padres that, like I said, almost completely addresses the starting pitching. I'd still want to add one more guy on top of these two, but let's talk about what's going to be in this for the teams other than the Twins in this deal first. Obviously, the Twins, if they're getting pitching, that's obviously the biggest need in the organization right now. Don't really have to go into the logic too much there. But for the Houston Astros, they have the opposite problem, believe it or not. Not that anybody's had too much pitching, but the Houston Astros have too many starting pitchers for how many slots they have in the rotation. And I understand Justin Verlander's coming off missing 2 years. He's kind of a question mark. Lance McCullers has never really been the picture of health himself. But right now they have legit MLB starters in Jake Odorizzi, who is not penciled into their five-man rotation. And I'm going to put up the roster resource projected pitching staff for Houston. I want to mention that Christian Javier, who's been a good MLB pitcher for 2 years, made a bunch of starts for Houston, but has also pitched out of the bullpen. He's not even listed in this projected pitching staff right now. So not only, maybe Odorizzi's not even their sixth starter, he might be their seventh starter. Houston also has a guy named Brandon Bielak who could be, not a guy that they would love to have to rely on, but he's a very nice sixth starter guy you can have in AAA. So they have a lot of starting pitching depth. And Jake Odorizzi is a guy who's making some money, and he's a guy who has a lot of incentives tied in to his contract. Again, I'm sure they'd love to keep him around for depth, but much like Paul DeJong, you don't want to pay your depth guys as much as Houston is paying Jake Odorizzi. They'd rather spend that money elsewhere. And, I do think, Odorizzi would have the potential to kind of be maybe a somewhat of a problem if they put him in the bullpen, because I'm assuming most of his contract incentives are based around starting, I would have to assume. So he'd probably be pissed, if they came into the season with him pitching out of the bullpen. Nobody really wants to deal with it. It's almost like the Kenta Maeda situation in a way in LA, that it just got to the point where, they couldn't guarantee him spots, and his contract is so incentive laden around starting pitching that he wanted to get out of there. So that's sort of the motivation for Houston to move Odorizzi. Now, what do they need? This is a team that's been investing in their bullpen quite a bit. Obviously Ryan Presley, former Twin, that they traded for and then extended, but they've also added a lot of guys and then have seen them leave last year on the deadline. They've done some work in free agency already for this year, but they don't have a stud lefty in their bullpen. So that's sort of part of our logic we're going to get to here in a sec. Now, the Padres, as disappointing a season as the Twins had, the Padres maybe the most disappointing season I can ever remember of any team in baseball. Legit World Series aspirations, I think even more so than the Twins, and they missed the playoffs. Was a mess. A lot of clubhouse issues with that team. They've now fired their manager, who's actually now on the Twins staff, Jace Tingler. Kind of a funny thing there. So I think this is a team that probably is looking to refresh some. And if you look at their payroll history, this is mostly a team that's been around the bottom 10 in the league in payroll. And last year they were more in the top 10. I don't think that's a long-term operating situation for them, I would guess. Who knows? It's hard to say. So I am kind of making a educated guess, I guess, here, that the Padres would like to unload some payroll. Not that they're going to completely go into rebuilding mode when they have guys like Tatis around, but I do think they would like to shed some salary, and this trade that I've built has them shedding a total of $50 million. Okay, so this isn't just shedding a little bit of salary. This is shedding a grand total of $50 million in guaranteed contracts. So that is significant on their end. And that's their main motivation. I get it. If any Padres fans happen to see this, they're going to hate the look of this trade. But I could really see their front office, more so their ownership, being in support of something like this. And it wouldn't completely kill their chances next season. It definitely makes them worse, but I don't think it cripples them. All right. So let me get the trade up here. This is going to really look good for the Twins at face value, but I think that logic is there. So again, for the Padres, it is a salary dump. It is mainly a salary dump. Both Snell and Drew Pomeranz, who I've included in this trade, have 2 years under contract. And again, a total of about $50 million that they're guaranteed that Houston is unloading. San Diego's unloading. Houston is getting rid of this extra piece in Odorizzi in their rotation, and then they're adding Drew Pomeranz to their bullpen, who has been one of the best relief pitchers in baseball the past 2 years. Stud left-handed reliever. He did end it last year injured, but he's expected to be coming into spring training healthy. So that maybe could be sort of the real thing that causes a problem with this trade, is if Drew Pomeranz isn't healthy, this isn't going to work, obviously. So that's sort of something to keep in mind on this. And then to Minnesota goes both Jake Odorizzi and former Cy Young Award winner Blake Snell. Now, I say that, but I don't think Snell is of that profile anymore of a Cy Young caliber guy. His overall numbers haven't been nearly as good since 2018, but again, I think that potential is there for him to be I think he's a top of the rotation starter. He's not a true ace, but it's not impossible to imagine him pitching like a true ace over stretches. So I like him as a target for the Twins. Again, he's owed some money. I don't think it's preventative. I don't think he's necessarily going to be overpaid. But I do think San Diego would like to shed that salary. And I think his value on this baseball trade values calculator kind of reflects both of those things. That no, this guy isn't like a true ace anymore, and San Diego probably would like to move him. He's only under contract for 2 more years. So it's not like he would be some kind of a huge long-term solution for the Twins. But hopefully, if you think about it 2 years from now, in addition to the guys that may be coming up this coming season, the Twins have another year to sort of build some more bullpen around that. So hopefully that buys them some time. Jake Odorizzi himself is also a guy who could be potentially under contract for 2 more years. So this is really patching up some big-time holes with the Twins. And, if they're not going to be spending in the free agent market on starting pitchers, I think this is the exact kind of things they need to do. And in this deal, all I have them giving up is Emmanuel Rodriguez. Now, this is a guy I really, really like. I want to make that clear. You may not have heard of him because he's so far away, but he's a guy that the Twins signed on the international market to a pretty hefty bonus. It would not surprise me if he sticks around if we're looking at 2 or 3 years from now, he's maybe the Twins' top prospect. That's the kind of potential this guy has. So I don't want to make this seem like the Twins aren't giving up anything. But to be fair, he is. I think I had him 17th on my prospect list for this year. So he's not a guy who's going to be contributing anytime soon. He's not a tippy-top prospect. So again, I would think any Padres fan who were to see this would be pretty pissed off at this idea. But I think when you factor in the money side of it, which, if we're being honest, we as fans, we probably don't like that this is the case, but the majority of baseball trades are mostly motivated by money, I would say. Again, just this one move. The Twins are not giving up anything from this year's roster, and they're getting Blake Snell and Jake Odorizzi to add into the rotation to go with Bailey Ober, Joe Ryan, and Dylan Bundy. Again, I'd prefer them to get another starting pitcher because somebody's going to be hurt all the time, so at least one guy. So I think they could get even more depth on top of that. But this really solves a lot of problems for the Twins, and I think makes them, I don't think it makes them the favorite by any means. No. And we'll see what Detroit does in addition to what they've already done. But this definitely makes them a way more serious contender. And, on Odorizzi, I think he would be happy to come back to Minnesota, again, because he has all those incentives in his contract. This would be a great place for somebody who wants to pitch in a starting rotation to go. I think that's why Dylan Bundy signed here and was excited to do so, because there's a lot of opportunity. But also, remember, the last time Odorizzi was on the Twins extended him the qualifying offer and he accepted it. I don't think he has any hard feelings about how his tenure in Minnesota went. So I think he would be happy to come back here. Obviously, the Astros have probably some more World Series, aspirations, and everybody wants to win. So maybe that would be something that Odorizzi would not feel great about leaving. Blake Snell, especially, going from San Diego to coming here, but he doesn't have any no trade. So he doesn't have any say, unfortunately for him. So hopefully, maybe, again, we have Jace Tingler. Hopefully he has a good relationship with him and things would work out well. But really this, I honestly think, maybe I'm nuts, but you'll have to tell me. And you have to be honest with yourself, again, with this trade values calculator, because there are some things that you can do that aren't going to make sense. I think this makes some sense for all three of these teams. Obviously, I think it works out best for the Twins, especially in terms of the MLB side. But this isn't even adding a prohibitive amount of salary to this team either. There's so much wiggle room right now that the Twins have while we're in lockout here that they can fit these guys in and still address some other issues. I think maybe the biggest takeaway for a Twins fan from this, and we're kind of living in fantasy world here, with this baseball trade value site and throwing out potential trades. Maybe San Diego has no intention of trading Blake Snell, but what I want to throw out there is that, there are so many options out there on the trade market. It's impossible to know exactly who or exactly what, teams are going to want for them, but there are absolutely moves that this team can make to address the rotation if they want to, if they're willing to make some deals, if they're willing to take some risks and maybe give up some prospects that'll hurt them. Again, this isn't because I don't like Emmanuel Rodriguez that he was in that trade. I actually like him quite a bit. And it would be risky to give him up. But I think given the overall, if the Twins have any asset that's really valuable right now, it's two things. Number one, they have a lot of payroll flexibility at the major league level. They don't have a lot of long-term commitments, so they can take on some salary. And number two, I don't know that I think that the farm system is one of the best in baseball. The tippy top isn't, I don't think, as good as a lot of the other teams in baseball have. But depth-wise, I would be shocked if more than 5 teams in the league have a deeper farm system than the Twins do. So deal from some of that depth, you know. You're going to get to the point where you're probably going to start losing more guys in the Rule 5 draft. You're going to have things like that happen to where you're going to start losing talent because there are systems in place that prevent you from hoarding so many prospects. So thanks for checking this video out. We'll talk again soon. If you enjoy the Twins, please consider subscribing to this channel for more Twins talk here on YouTube.